Marcus had known about the Lewis Fork camp. That much was established. What he hadn't said, what Elias had noticed him not saying, in the way you notice absences when you've been paying attention to a person for several hours, was how he knew, and from whom, and what the person who told him had said beyond the food being hot. The response team, the person you heard it from, what was their name? Marcus looked at him. Briggs, he said. He was with the county search and rescue. He died 2 years ago. I knew Briggs, Elias said. I know you did, Marcus said. He mentioned you. Something passed between them. Not a full communication, more the acknowledgement that a full communication existed and would be had later when the time was right. Lena's pen was moving, and then it stopped, and she looked between the two men with the expression of a journalist who has just identified the real story inside the story she was already covering. What did he say, Marcus, Briggs, about the camp? Marcus was quiet for a moment. He said the food was hot and the tents were intact and everything was where it should be except the 6 people who should have been there. He paused. He said the fire was burning. He said there was... He stopped. Someone sitting at it, Elias said. He said something, Marcus said carefully. He said he wasn't sure it was someone. Sam had his sleeping bag pulled entirely around his shoulders now, hood up, only his face visible. He said, "And you're about to tell us what it was?" Elias looked at the fire between them, their fire, the shelter fire, burning steadily in the Whitetop Mountain dark. "He am," he said. The Lewis Fork Wilderness Permit system in those years was paper-based. Hikers filed at the visitor center, took a carbon copy, left the original with us. The group that had permitted for the backcountry camp on the 3rd weekend of August had filed properly. 6 people, 4 nights, a designated site in the Lewis Fork drainage about 2 miles from the nearest trailhead. The permit listed them as a hiking club from the Roanoke Valley, a group that had been coming to this district for years, experienced, no incidents in their record. I knew 2 of them by name from previous seasons. Good people, careful hikers. They were due out on the Monday. When they hadn't signed out by Tuesday afternoon, I called the emergency contact on the permit, a woman in Roanoke who was the wife of one of the group members. She told me she hadn't heard from her husband since Saturday, which was normal for backcountry trips, but that he usually called from the trailhead when they came out. It was now Tuesday and she hadn't heard. I activated the search and rescue protocol. Briggs came in with his county team and we went up Tuesday evening with enough daylight to reach the site before full dark. The site was exactly as you'd expect a well-used backcountry camp to look at the end of a 4-night trip, organized, the detritus of several days of cooking and living in the field, the particular settled quality of a space that has been inhabited and cared for. 4 tents, properly staked, a food storage system properly hung, the fire ring central, the way all fire rings were central. The fire was burning. Not the remains of a fire, active, fed, the kind of burn that required attention every hour or so to maintain, and it was maintained, the wood stacked beside the ring in the way careful campers stacked wood, with more beside it, enough for another several hours of burning. Someone had been tending it recently, within the last hour, I estimated, based on the burn rate and the wood consumption. The cookpot was on the camp stove beside the fire ring. The stove was off, but the pot was warm. Briggs put his hand near it, not touching, and said, "Still hot." The pot contained what had been a vegetable stew, partially consumed, the servings for 6 people reduced to the servings for perhaps 3, as if 3 of the 6 had eaten, and 3 had not yet gotten to theirs. 6 camp cups arranged around the fire ring. 3 of them used, 3 of them clean. Everything in order, everything suggesting a camp in the middle of an evening meal that had been interrupted, not abandoned in panic, not left in a hurry, but simply paused in the way you pause when something requires your attention and you expect to return to it. No sign of where 6 people had gone. Briggs and I walked the perimeter.
The surrounding vegetation showed no evidence of 6 people moving through it in any direction. No broken branches, no compressed ground, no trace of passage. The trail in was the only trail, and it showed our own boot prints coming in, and underneath them the prints from the group's arrival days earlier, but nothing going out. Nothing.
We set up a search perimeter and called in additional resources for the morning. I stayed at the camp that night with 2 of Briggs's team, while the others went back to the trailhead to coordinate. We kept the fire going. It seemed wrong to let it go out, though I couldn't have explained why, and Briggs didn't question it. At some point in the middle of the night, I'd been doing perimeter checks every hour and had just come back to the fire. Briggs said, "Elias." He said it quietly, the way you say a name when you want to direct attention to something without creating a disturbance around the thing you're directing attention to. I looked at where he was looking. Across the fire ring from where we sat, the far side of the ring, the side that had been empty since we arrived, something was sitting. I want to be precise about what I saw, because precision is what I have, and precision is what matters when you're describing something at the edge of what description can handle. It was sitting in the way you sit at a fire, oriented toward the flame, at the appropriate distance, in a posture that suggested warmth-seeking, the posture of a person who had been outside for a while and had found a fire and is making use of it. That was the shape of it, the functional shape, the behavioral shape, the thing it was doing with the space it occupied. What it was is where precision becomes difficult. It was not one of the 6 campers. I was certain of this before I had conscious reasons to be certain of it, the certainty arriving before the analysis the way certain certainties do. It was not a person who had wandered in from outside the camp. The perimeter checks had confirmed no approach, and Briggs and I had both been awake and alert, and we had not heard anything approach. It was large is the word I keep coming back to, though large is insufficient. Not large in the way of a big person, but large in the way of something that was not calibrated to the scale of a human fire ring. It was too much for the space it was in, too present. The way a bear is too much for a small room, not because of physical dimensions, but because of the quality of its being there, the density of its occupancy of the space. And it was sitting at the fire with the ease of something that had been sitting at fires for a very long time. Briggs said, very quietly, "Don't move." I didn't move. I was not going to move. Every part of me that was older than reason and more reliable than reason was absolutely still, and the part of me that was reason was catching up, and what reason said when it caught up was, be still and watch and do not do anything that changes the situation until you understand the situation better than you currently do. We watched it for, I timed it later, working back from when I next checked my watch, which was 2:47 a.m. when we stood up, approximately 11 minutes. It sat at the fire for 11 minutes. It did not look at us. It did not acknowledge us. It sat with the fire the way you sit with a fire when the fire is the point, not using the fire to see by, not cooking over it, just sitting with it in the companionable way that people sit with fires, because fire is something to sit with. Then it stood. Standing, it was, I will use large again because I don't have a better word. It stood, and the standing changed the scale of the camp around it. The tents suddenly smaller, the trees at the perimeter suddenly closer, the fire suddenly less significant against the fact of this thing standing beside it. It looked at the fire for a moment after standing, then it looked at us. I want to be careful here. I want to be precise. I said it looked at us, but what I mean is that its attention moved to us, that we became the object of whatever it used in the way that we used eyes. I don't know what it saw when it looked at us. I know what I felt when it looked at us, which was the specific feeling of being fully apprehended, not seen in the surface way of being in someone's visual field, but seen in the way of being understood, categorized, filed. The way a very old and very intelligent thing looks at something smaller and newer than itself and takes its full measure in a moment and moves on. It looked at us for perhaps 5 seconds. Then it walked into the trees. I say walked. The word is approximate. Briggs and I sat at the fire for a long time after it left. We didn't speak. The fire burned. The camp was the same camp it had been, the cookpot still warm, the cups arranged around the ring, the stacked wood sufficient for several more hours of burning. Eventually, Briggs said, "Should we put that in the report?" I said, "Put what in the report?" He looked at me. He understood what I was doing, and he did it with me. What we put in the report was the facts that the facts could hold. The 6 people from the Roanoke Valley Hiking Club were never found. The case is open. It will remain open. These things remain open the way they remain open because open is the only honest status for them. What I've thought about for 15 years, the thing I think about more than the search, more than the 6 people, more than any of the rest of it, is the fire. Someone had been tending the fire. When we arrived, the fire had been tended within the hour. We had been at that camp from dusk to after midnight before Briggs and I saw what was sitting at it, and in that time, neither of us had tended it, and it had not gone out. It had not diminished in the way an untended fire diminishes. Something had been tending it before we arrived and continued tending it while we were there, and we had not seen it tending the fire, and it had been sitting at the fire when Briggs said my name. I think about that, the tending, the maintenance of something, the care. I think about what it means to tend a fire that 6 people are no longer there to need. I think about what it means to sit at a fire that you have tended after the people who built it are gone. I think about whether that is grief or habit or something I don't have a word for. The maintenance of a thing past the point of its purpose, out of some quality that resembles, from the outside, the quality we call devotion. I think about the 6 cups around the fire ring, 3 used, 3 clean. As if at the moment everything stopped, 3 people had eaten and 3 had not yet gotten to it. I think about which 3. I have never arrived at an answer that satisfies me. I don't expect to. Some questions are open for the same reason as some cases, because open is the only honest status for them. The fire in the shelter had burned low again, and this time it was Marcus who leaned forward and added wood, the action precise and unhurried, the motion of someone who had been paying attention to what the fire needed without appearing to watch it. The flame came up, and the shelter was warm again, and the storm outside continued its patient work. Nobody spoke for a long time. This was the longest silence of the night, longer than after the map story, longer than after Carrie Voss saying thank you. The silence of 6 people sitting with something that had come to rest in the room and was not going to move. Sam said, finally, "The 3 cups. The 3 who hadn't eaten yet," he said it quietly. "Do you think they went first or last?" Elias looked at him across the fire. In the firelight, his face was the face of someone who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time and learned to carry it without showing the weight. "I think," he said, that distinction may not have meant what it would mean to us." Sam sat with this. Lena said, "The thing at the fire. The 15 years you've been thinking about it, the tending." She paused. "You said it saw you, fully, categorized you, filed you." "That's what it felt like," Elias said. "And then it left." "Yes." "Why?" she said. "If it fully apprehended you, if it knew everything about what you were, why did it leave?" Elias was quiet for a moment. He looked at the fire. "I've thought about that too," he said. "I think," he paused, "I think we weren't what it was sitting with the fire for. I think we were incidental to it. I think it sat with that fire because that fire was something to sit with, and we were 2 people who happened to be there, and it looked at us the way you look at something that is present, but not the point." "We weren't the point," Sam said. She said it in her clinical voice, and then she said it again more quietly to herself. "No," Elias said. "The fire was the point." He paused. "That's what I've come to after 15 years. The fire was the point. The fire and the camp and the cups and the meal and the whole arrangement of a group of people who had been living and eating and sitting together for 4 days. He looked around at their fire, their arrangement around it, the cups and the food and the living texture of a group of people spending a night together. I think it came to sit with what had been there, with the evidence of human habitation, with the fire that people had made. He was quiet for a moment.
I think it was the closest thing to lonely that something like that can be, he said. I think sitting at a human fire in a human camp is the closest thing to company that something like that has. The shelter was very quiet. Outside, Whitetop Mountain held the storm, and the storm held the mountain, and somewhere in the Virginia highlands, in a Lewis Fork drainage campsite that was now 15 years grown over and returned to forest, a fire ring held the cold ash of a fire that 6 people had built and something else had tended, and 2 men had sat beside and not put in their report. Greta said softly, "3 movements, you said." "3, Elias agreed. "The first was the land. The second was what people bring." She looked at him. "The third is the edge, the boundary between the known and the unknowable." "Yes," he said. "We're at the edge now," she said. It wasn't a question. Elias looked at her for a moment with the careful reading look he'd been giving each of them across the night as they arrived at the things they were going to arrive at. "We've been at the edge for a while," he said. He fed the fire, one piece placed with precision, the fire receiving it. "The 7th story," he said, "is about a place on the Mount Rogers Ridge where the air is wrong."